Okay, so this video is going to go over the Progressive Era, and this is the era that follows the Gilded Age. Remember, the Gilded Age is where we saw all of the problems in our country, and the Progressive Era is where you're going to see progress from those problems. You're going to see some things fixed. You're going to see the country moving forward. Remember, progress means moving forward. So first off, we have the agrarian movement, and when you see the word agrarian, this is one of our vocabulary words. Agrarian, I want you to think of farming, I want you to think of ranching, I want you to think of agriculture. So if this is a movement regarding agrarian topics, what types of people pop into your mind when you think of the agrarian movement? Some of the things that you should be thinking of are farmers, ranchers, people who work and deal with the land. So the agrarian movement started because of these problems that the agrarian worker was facing. And one of those problems is overproduction, agricultural overproduction, meaning there were too many crops being grown. And if you know anything about the rules of supply and demand, when there is too much of a product and not enough demand to meet that product, then what happens is the price gets lowered. Okay, if not a lot of people want it, the seller needs to get rid of it somehow, and that means selling it at a lower cost. So this is a problem that they're facing. Also, like we discussed before, there is the issue of the railroads. The railroads were charging extremely high costs to small businesses. They were favoring big businesses, and this proved to be a problem for your average farmer. These two problems combined contribute to the issue of farmer debt. Now, debt is money that you owe. When farmers borrow money to plant their crops and have their homestead, etc., they need to pay that money back through the cultivation and selling of crops. But if that's not happening, if they're not making the money that they anticipated and it costs them a lot to ship it out, then what's going to happen is they're not going to be able to pay that debt. And when you don't pay your debts in society, you end up with a poor credit rating. Now, credit is what people who lend you money look at and decide whether you are likely or unlikely to pay it back. Now, if you have a history of not paying back money that you owe, then you have poor credit. And that means that whoever is lending you that money is taking a risk. And the bigger risk that that person takes, the higher the interest rate for that loan. So for example, if you were to borrow $100 from somebody and you had really, really good credit, then that would mean maybe you're only going to have to pay them an additional $10 in interest. Now, if you have bad credit, if they're like, oh man, I don't know if I should lend this person $100, I'm taking a big risk, you might end up paying $30 instead of $10. So when you have high interest rates, that means that the total amount of money that you are borrowing is going to be more than you would have if you had good credit. So these farmers have poor credit, which means that they're going to end up paying more money for their future loans, and that's a problem. Now, you also have natural disasters, things that happen that are just completely out of anybody's hands. You have droughts that don't bring much needed water for the crops. You have bugs that are eating up the crops, and you also have floods, overflooding, overwatering of agriculture also will destroy them. So next we're going to talk about the Grange movement. And the Grange movement was a social club, started in 1867, and what their goals were to overcome rural isolation. Now, we've talked about the difference between rural and urban. When we talked about the Gilded Age, we said that there was a lot of urbanization happening, people that were moving to the big cities, right? Now, rural is the opposite of urban. Rural, you're talking about farms, you're talking about ranches, places out in the middle of nowhere. Now, remember, the Homestead Act gave 160 acres to people to go and move west and cultivate the land. So now what's happening is that these people have so much land, 160 acres is a massive amount of land, that they become isolated. And this social club wanted to help solve that problem and also talk about new farming techniques that might help them overcome the problems that we saw on the previous slide. So this movement, this club, what it wound up leading to was economic and social reform. Now remember, economic meaning money, social meaning people. They wanted things to change. And they did blame the railroads for overcharging the little man, okay? Remember that the railroads were being unfair to the small business owner, for example, like the farmer. And as a result of that, you had in 1877 Munn versus Illinois, which is a Supreme Court decision that stated that the right of a state to regulate businesses that affected public interest lied with the state. And in 1886, the Supreme Court ruled that only Congress could regulate rates on interstate commerce. And you get the Interstate Commerce Commission with that, and laissez-faire ideas begin to diminish. This is where the government came in and reestablished their right to regulate the railroads. Remember, Interstate Commerce Commission, that was the decision about the railroad. And with that, the idea of government staying out of things, remember, hands off, laissez-faire, hands off, the idea of government having that laissez-faire policy begins to fade away. So next you have the rise of the third party. Now the third party during this time is the Populist Party. Remember, a third party is a smaller group than what you would typically have, and these guys were around from 1891 to 1896. And what they wanted to do was provide an outlet for minorities. For people like your farmers, for your average Joe, to come out and say, these are the problems that we're having, these are the issues that we need fixed. And also, them getting together also gave them a chance to form new ideas. And when you get more members in that party, you get even more ideas. And the bigger the party gets, the more numbers you have, the more voting power that you have. Okay, so that's important. As the Populist Party got bigger, their ideas became more and more important. And they represented the common man, the common woman. Remember what was popular during this time. They wanted to end oppression. They wanted to end injustice. They wanted to end the poverty. All of the issues that they faced during the Gilded Age, they wanted to resolve. So the Populist Party had a man by the name of William Jennings Bryan. And he adopted a lot of the ideas that the Populist Party was popularizing. One of William Jennings Bryan's most famous speeches, the Cross of Gold speech, we will cover in class in detail. We'll analyze it as a primary source. And because of that speech, because he adopted much of the policies of the Populist Party, he did get their support. Ultimately, it wasn't good enough, and William McKinley, who was a pro-business candidate, did win in 1896. In 1900, William Jennings Bryan tried again, but again, McKinley won. McKinley was pro-business, and that was pretty much the end of the Populist parties. Their ideas were not strong enough to win out the government. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Be on the lookout for your next video, and be sure to check out the Gilded Age videos if you haven't already. See you in class.